You have your safety gear, you have your tools. Now I assume you are ready to build something. I get that you are probably chomping at the bit to get into some woodworking, but let's start each video with a segment called Tool Talk. In this segment, we will talk about a new tool that you can put on your wish list to add to your toolbox. Today I want to discuss power sanders. When it comes to making a project, you will soon see that you will spend more time sanding than actually making the product itself. It is not difficult to hide minor flaws on a product in an unseen area, but you can't hide a blotchy or uneven finish on a surface that is seen. The finish work of a project can be the deciding factor of a meh product versus a great product. This will require an insane amount of sanding, and doing this by hand will be exhausting. This is where a power sander will come in very useful. The two that I use are an orbital sander and the palm sander. The orbital sander tends to be a little more robust than the palm sander, so I use it for heavy sanding with an 80 grit sanding disc. This also works great for stripping paint or finishes off of a project for refinishing. Now the palm sander tends to be a little gentler. I will use this for my finish work to smooth my project by first sanding it with a 120 grit, then a 150 grit to get a nice smooth surface. At this point I put whatever finish I want to use and call it a day. Unless, of course, that finish is urethane, in which case there is a little more work to do. We will cover that later. I do also have a belt sander, but in my opinion, those are in a league of their own. These things are monsters and have a considerable learning curve to them. If you are using one and leave it in a spot for just a millisecond too long, they can leave a huge rut on your project that you will definitely not be able to hide. These sanders will eat everything in their path without prejudice. I actually ended up mounting mine to a table and use it to round off corners, which they can do quick, fast, and in a hurry. Okay, geez, you want to build something. Fine, put on your safety gear, and let's get started. For our first project, we're going to build a set of homemade clamps. You should either have an 8-foot 2x4 or two 4-foot 2x4s. The first thing we want to do is take a look at the ends of the wood. Terminology, this is referred to as the end grain. They sometimes use staples to hold the UPC code on the ends of the wood. If you have a piece that has been cut at the store, you only need to check the ends that haven't been cut. If there is a staple, grab your screwdriver and put the flathead bit into the receiver. The flathead is the one that looks like this. Use this bit to pry out the staple and remove the UPC code. We do not want our saw blade to possibly hit this staple while we are cutting and cause undue dulling of the blade. Then let's lay the wood down so that we are looking at the face, not the sides. Whenever you are making a cut, regardless of what saw we are using, it is important to know at what stroke the cut occurs. For our hand saw, the cut action happens when we push the saw. Why is this important? Because tear out can occur during the cutting motion of the blade. Terminology, tear out is when the blade grabs the fibers of the board and lifts or pries them up instead of cutting through them. So in the instance of the hand saw, the tear out is going to occur on the bottom of the cut with the push motion. Now that we know that, we can prepare our wood accordingly. Let's say we were making something like a table, where this piece is going to be the tabletop. We definitely don't want the tear out to show. With that said, I would take this piece of wood and determine what face is the prettiest and mark it with a T with my pencil. That would tell me that this side is the side I don't want the tear out to occur. Since I am using a handsaw, I would want this T to be facing up so that any tear out would happen on the bottom of the board. If I was using a circular saw, where the cut happens on the upstroke of the blade, the tear out will occur on the side that is facing up. I would want to cut this piece with the T facing down. So let's get ready to make our cut lines. Let's make our cut lines. If you're using a handsaw, use the tape measure and from the end of the wood, measure down 3/4 of an inch and make a mark with our pencil. One of the things that I do with wood I am using is cut off the end grains. These are usually not very attractive, so they need to go. This is what we are doing here. Now let's use our combination square and extend it so that it completely covers the face of the wood. You can adjust this square by turning this knob to loosen it. After you loosen it, gently pull the ruler portion to cover the face and then tighten the knob back up. Line up the edge of the ruler so that it lines up with our mark, and we're going to draw a line completely across. Do it a couple times, make it dark. If you are using a circular saw, we can use the same method and freehand the cut, but I will show you how to use the square to get straight cuts every time. What we want to do is take a measurement from the blade to the shorter edge of the guide on our circular saw. In this case, it is 1 inch. Now we can add that to the original cut measurement of 3/4 of an inch, and we would get 1 3/4 inches. This will be the line that we're going to use if we're going to use a circular saw. That would be our total. Now we can use the square as a cutting guide so the saw gives us a nice perfect cut. And let's go ahead and just darken that line. So now we're ready for our first cut. We have our lines drawn and now we're ready to cut. Let's secure the board to cut it with the handsaw. Using our 2 clamps, we need to find an area that we can clamp this bugger down so it won't move around on us while we're cutting. I will be using the extensions on my table saw for this. If you don't have this available, using anything that won't easily move with a lip that will allow you to clamp the board down will work. We want to make sure that we have enough overhang on the board so that we don't cut the item that we are clamping the board to. So in this case, I'm going to clamp here, and I'm going to clamp back here. Now our board is secure. We're going to firmly grasp the saw and line it up with our line that we drew. Now, let's pull the saw to create a notch in our wood that we can use as our guide for cutting. Now that we have our saw lined up with our cut line and it's perpendicular to the board, use your free hand to grab an area of the board that is away from the blade to help stabilize yourself. Now we can start our push to begin the cut. This may take a couple tries to get the feel of your saw. If you put too much downward pressure, the teeth may grab more than the saw will cut. This will cause it to bind and you won't be able to move it. That's okay. Just remove the saw, line it up again, and slightly change the angle. This time when you push, use less downward pressure to start the cut. Again, you're going to need to get the feel of your tool on this one. Once you got it figured out, continue cutting through while keeping the saw lined up with your cut line. If you get about halfway in or even less, and you notice that your saw is not cutting on the line anymore, do not try to adjust your saw to get back on the line. It won't work. What you want to do is either take it out and try and cut the line again, or draw a line slightly below the one you already have and completely start over. Remember, you are learning your tool. Alright, here we go. Let's see if I can still do this. I don't even know if this blade is sharp. Alright, that's about as far as I can go with that, because this blade is definitely not made for cutting a 2x4. But you can see what I was doing here. So remember, I got my downward push is my cut, and my upward pull is just to reset the saw for the next downward push. I got the feel of the amount of pressure I need to put on it to get a cut. Again, if I push too hard and the saw binds and won't move, remove it and just start at a different angle. Alright, so that's about all I'm going to do with that one. So that was just to show you how the saw is going to, how the hand saw is going to work. If you've got the saw that I recommended, you're probably all the way through, because it is sharp and it is heavy duty. Now let's talk about making the cut with the circular saw. There are some gadgets on here that we should cover before we start cutting. First, you'll notice a button or switch located usually somewhere near the trigger. This is the safety switch. If you try to engage the saw before pressing this button, the saw will not start. Pressing this button will allow you to pull the trigger and use the saw. You may also notice a notch or groove on the front of the saw. This notch is what you would use to line up to any cut line you have drawn. This will allow you to use it as a guide if you wanted to do a freehand cut. You'll also notice a knob usually on the front of the saw. When you loosen this knob, you can change the angle or bevel of the cut by adjusting the shoe. The last knob we will talk about is the blade depth knob. If you loosen this one, you can adjust the shoe to set the depth of the blade for the cut. We will set our depth to cut through a 2x4. With that out of the way, let's prep our cut. Line up the square to the line we previously created for the circular saw cut. We're going to do this a little bit differently. Our first clamp is going to hold the wood, what we are clamping to, and the square. Then use the second clamp to prevent the wood from moving while we cut. Remember to make sure the cut area is away from the object that we are clamped to so that we will not cut into it. Now we line up the guide to our fence by butting them together and putting the front of the plate onto the wood. Once we got a good feel for that, check to make sure the blade is not already touching the wood. If it is, back it up a bit so the blade is clear from the wood. Readjust the pan to the square if needed. Use your free hand to grab the wood in an area that is clear from the blade for stabilization. There are 3 motions that are going to happen as you guide this saw through the wood. The first one is pushing the saw. Second is holding the saw to the wood. And the third is holding the saw against the square. You will need to learn your tool here. If you go in faster than the blade cuts, you will see that the saw is really struggling to make the cut. Slow down. If you notice that the saw is lifting from the wood, you will need to apply more downward pressure. If you notice that the saw is starting to cut away from the guide, remove the saw, adjust the square, lower, and try again. Do not try to maneuver the saw to try to get it back on the line. Pull or push the safety switch with your thumb and pull the trigger. I have to move my dog out of the way first. Alright, let's go ahead and do the cut. So there we go. We have the end grain removed. Now we can start our cuts for our projects. Remove the clamps. So now we have removed 3/4 of an inch from this board just to get the end grain off. Now I know in video 1 when I talked about safety and I said don't throw your wood on the floor, I am throwing this one on the floor because my dog is waiting for it. So now we can take our board and we can start making the cuts we need for our project. So let's measure down 21 inches. Now remember, if you're using a handsaw, that will be our cut line. If you want to do the circular saw trick with the square, we're actually going to measure and mark at 22. For this one I will be using the circular saw. Line up our square, and then we've got our line. So you may notice if you have the 4-foot board, when you slide it out to make your cut, you'll notice that it's kind of top heavy. So let's get our cut line past what we're cutting on so we don't cut into it, and we'll go ahead and put the bracer on. Now we can set up our square. I'm going to go this way. Clamp it down. Grab our circular saw. Again, lining everything up. Make sure the dog is out of the way. And now we have our 21-inch piece. Now when it comes to cutting, if you did the 4-footers, when it comes to cutting the second piece, you'll notice that when we make the 21-inch line, we definitely do not have enough space left here to get a good clamp. So what we're going to do is we're going to measure the 21 from the top, but in this case we are going to subtract an inch and then turn it around. We're going to draw our cut line for the circular. We'll clamp the back end. Make sure we're clear of where we're cutting. We'll throw our guide on. Line everything up. There we go. We have two 21-inch pieces. Now we have our two 21-inch pieces. Next, we will need to cut 5 pieces at 4 inches each. We will need the second board to do this if you had your wood cut at the store. Use the side that was cut to measure from and remember to mark that side with a T. We will designate what side we want to show. I know this is not a project that you are going to list and sell, but I want you to get into the habit of marking the top. Set your lines and make the cuts. Then set those pieces aside. Store the leftover scrap pieces away, as we will be using those in a different project. For the 5 4-inch pieces, you're on your own. Go ahead and set up your cut lines as we did before and make the appropriate cuts. Once you've got all 5 pieces, set them aside and we'll move on to the next step. We now have all the pieces we need to make our clamp. First thing I want to do is pick out the best 4 pieces from our 4-inch cut. The 5th piece we're going to use as a sacrificial piece, so we're going to set it aside. What I want you to do is find the center of all 4 of these pieces of wood. You can do that by measuring from the opposite corners and go corner to corner. Line up your straight edge. You should now have an X. This is the center. I want you to do this on the front and back of all 4 pieces. Let's get to know our drill. These drills have a lot of features, so let's go over them. Most of these drills have a variable speed feature that will come in very handy on certain circumstances. Variable speed means that if I pull the trigger a little bit, it will slowly rotate the chuck. They also have a clutch setting on the chuck. This clutch is set to how much torque you want to apply to what you are driving in. The switch by the trigger is the forward-backward setting. Setting the arrow pointing forward will drill the hole or drive in a screw. Setting it backward will remove a bit or back out a screw. The last item is the speed setting on the top. 2 is high speed and is good for drilling holes and setting screws. But what if you want to put in a very large screw or lag bolt? I would recommend using the number 1 setting. This is low speed but very high torque and would work great for larger fasteners. With that said, we will mostly be working with the setting number 2. The first thing we need to do is put the 5/64 drill bit into our drill. We can do this by switching the drill into its reverse mode, firmly grasping the chuck, and slowly pulling the trigger. This is assuming that the chuck is in the closed position. If it is already open, you will not need to do this. Grab your bit with the cutting side out and center it in the chuck with one hand and put the drill into the forward position with the other hand. Then with the hand holding the bit, grasp the chuck and slowly pull the trigger. You will notice that the chuck is closing around the base of the bit. Once it has a hold of the bit, Check the bit on your piece of wood to make sure that it will go all the way through by measuring it to the base of the chuck or the base of the bit. If it doesn't, release the chuck, pull the bit out a bit, and reset it till it goes all the way through. Once you have this done, put the drill in forward again and grab the chuck. Slowly pull the trigger until the bit is firmly set. If you are using an older drill and you do not have a keyless chuck, insert the key into one of the holes on the side of the chuck. Line up the teeth of the key so they are grabbing the teeth on the chuck. Turn the key to loosen the chuck. Place the bit inside the chuck and use the key to tighten the chuck. Same rule applies. Make sure the bit will go all the way through the wood. Adjust as necessary. If the bit goes in crooked, release the chuck, align the bit again, and tighten as before. Now, before we drill, you may have noticed a small pin on your combination square. This pin is called a scribe. It is used to make measurement marks on the wood, and it is probably the first thing you're going to lose. Let's use it to poke the middle of the X. Once you have it inserted, rotate it a couple times. This will be a starting point for our drill. Place the sacrificial piece of lumber under the piece we're going to drill the hole in. When the bit goes all the way through, this will serve two purposes. The first is that it'll reduce tear out, and it will make it so we are not drilling a hole into our table. Make sure that your drill is in the forward setting and insert the drill bit into the point that we just created. Using your free hand, firmly grasp the piece of wood that we are going to be drilling the hole in and slowly pull the trigger. As the bit starts to cut into the wood, increase the speed by pulling the trigger all the way. A quick safety note here. For a small bit like this, it's okay to hold the piece of wood with your hand. If we were using a larger bit or a hole cutter, I would recommend clamping it. Larger bits can have a tendency to grab the wood while they are cutting. This will then spin that piece of wood, and believe me, you don't want to be holding it when that happens. You just created a pilot hole. A pilot hole allows the screw threads to cut directly into the hole, which greatly reduces splitting the wood near an end or an edge. Tips of screws don't always enter material accurately. It is much easier to drill precise locations with a drill bit than the tip of the screw. Let's see how you did. Flip your piece of wood over and see how close you came to the center of the X on the opposite side. If you are really close, that's great. If not, adjust your drill on the next hole and see if you can get closer. We're going to drill all four this way. Once you have a pilot hole in all four pieces, I then want you to grab one of our 21-inch pieces. On either end, I want you to measure down 3.5 inches and make a mark. Now on the end grain, measure 1 3/4 inch towards the top of this board, and we're going to make another mark. Then we're going to grab one of our 4-inch pieces, and we are going to make a mark at the bottom of it for 2 inches. Then take one of our 4-inch pieces, and I want you to line it up so that the two marks that you made are perfectly aligned. We will then take a clamp and clamp it down and make sure that you're clear of the hole that you're going to be putting the screw in. We'll take our drill and we'll continue the pilot hole. Then grab one of your 2.5-inch screws with your T25 bit, and we're going to slowly screw that in, just until you got some resistance. We can now remove our clamps and remove the square. We now have the top of our clamp done. Go ahead and grab your other piece, and I want you to follow the same process. We're almost done here, peeps. Lastly, for the bottom, we will want it to be adjustable. So let me show you how this homemade clamp works. This is a dry run. Do not use this with glue yet. Let's use the sacrificial piece and the scrap that you set aside so you can learn how to make these work with whatever pieces you are gluing together. We're going to butt the piece of wood at the top, then place the next piece right next to it. Here is where the 1-gallon paint stick will come into play. We will place this stick next, and then the bottom of the clamp next to it. Let's screw in the bottom, and then we will remove the paint stick spacer. The reason I love using paint sticks as spacers is because, one, they're free, and the 1-gallon stick is exactly 1/8 of an inch, and the 5-gallon stick is exactly 1/4 inch. Now you can take one of our wood door shims, and we need to find the angle. So when it comes to the door shim, we're looking for this part, the part that is angled down. So you can do that by placing it flat and looking to see if you have a perpendicular side here. If you do, then this piece is the top. If you don't, flip it over and look for the perpendicular side on the back. And if you have it there, then you've got your piece that you want to mark. These clamps will still work even if you don't have the right side. So don't be discouraged if you have the wrong side. But in this scenario, I did find that this is the piece that is angled down, and this piece is actually flat. So I put the B for bottom. So we know that that's the bottom. We want to place this shim in the base of the clamp so the angled side is facing the bottom of the clamp. Now it is just a matter of pushing the shim in to create tension on the wood. After you get some tension on it, use your fingers and make sure the wood is seated together with as little seam as possible. Add more tension by hand if you can. Then you have a pretty good clamp on the wood. When it comes to clamping wood, you are not trying to physically squish the wood together. More so, just lightly squeeze them together. Again, this is a dry run. Do not use these clamps without a piece of saran wrap, wax paper, or parchment paper protecting the bottom of the clamp. The glue squeeze out will attach the project to the clamp, and it will ruin the clamp when you try to take it off. Now, to remove the wood from your clamp after it dries, it's just a matter of lifting the shim out, and your glue and your wood will now be glued together. You have made your first wood project. Are there other ways to make these? Yep. Are there better ways to make these? Absolutely. But that's not what this is about. This was about learning how to use your tools. I am not going to be grading your projects. Maybe later on in the series, when you are more confident in your abilities, you will take a look at these and say, ah, now I know how to modify these to make them better. This concludes episode 3 of the series. Get ready for episode 4, where we will make a step stool. You will need two 2x4x8s for this project. And again, it is okay if you cut them in half to transport them. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit the bell icon to be notified of new episodes as they become available. Head up to your local home improvement store to get your lumber, and let's have some fun while learning.